talk about overcoming crochet challenges. This is such a positive hobby and it's brought such a lot of good things to my life, but it has also brought me so close to throwing in the towel and frustration. I want to talk about things that can be challenging in the hobby and how we can overcome or accept each and every one of them in order to still enjoy what we're doing. I'm going to stack this down into categories so that I don't lose my train of thought, and we're going to start with patterns. I'm a crochet pattern designer and it is such a big part of why I enjoy the hobby. But for most people, the way that you enjoy your hobby is through other people's patterns, and it's certainly how I started out. But finding good patterns can be quite a challenge. I always dive into books first if I have this problem. There are a wealth of amazing patterns online, but if you are stuck to finding a good pattern, then can I recommend going through some books? I have got like a library of vintage crochet books. I say library, it's like a shelf, but you know, of crochet books, and flicking through them is a wonderful way to find a good pattern really, really quickly. Some websites do pattern roundups, and if you have a designer whose pattern you've known in the past as well, go to their website and flick through their catalogue. Unfortunately, these days, just typing something into Google to go and find it is a lot more of a challenge because so many of the images when you look for X crochet are AI. I have an identifying AI video here if you want to avoid that, but physical books are a great way of doing it, but so is going to a designer that you know or that someone you know knows. Sometimes patterns themselves can be frustrating. They can be frustrating because you are new to reading patterns or because the way in which the pattern is written is different to what you've used before. They can be frustrating because they're written like as a diagrammatic chart rather than verbal instructions. All that can really interfere with your enjoyment of it. And I would say that charts that translate different types of crochet instructions can be really, really useful for that. So can, if the pattern is frustrating you, messaging the person who wrote it politely and friendly, just to ask a little question, but also just putting that pattern down and going on to a different one and cooling off. If you know someone else who crochets, sending them a quick text with a picture of it and going, hey, does this make sense to you? Another really good way around it. Yarn is a source of a surprising number of crochet frustrations, and we've got to start off with tangled yarn. Now, I am a start from the edge with the yarn person, and that is because on too many occasions I have tried working from the center pull and it has got tangled with the end of the yarn piece, and every couple of feet I'm unwinding it. My advice to you, if you make things fairly frequently so you have a use for scraps, is to just cut off the tangle and move on with your life. Keep that yarn so that you can use it as scraps. It's really funny. I love untangling things like fairy lights and slinkies. That probably says more about my family life than anything else, but some things are great fun to untangle. Yarn, no. Cut it off. Start again. Or give it to someone who likes untangling yarn. They've got to be out there, right? Limited colour choices, again, can be really frustrating in yarn. The only way that I have found that really works around this is through advanced planning on the project that I'm going to make. It is an annoying limiting factor, but that is one of the ones where you kind of have to take it on the chin a little bit, or accept that you're going to need to invest more money from getting yarn from further afield, looking in new places, buying more expensive yarn. But a lot of the time, colour limitations, you just have to take a deep breath and work out how you can do the same project with what you've got. Or dye it yourself, but that sounds dangerous. Something that gets me a lot is yarn weight inconsistencies. It's like clothing sizes. Like, how am I such vastly different size in different shops? Well, it's the same with yarn weights. You buy your yarn and you need DK to do this project, right? And you've got 3 different brands of DK yarn, and you start working it up and you're like, well, the thickness is wildly different between them. It's super frustrating. One of the things that you can do to get around it is to look at the yardage and the physical weight of the yarn and pick DK, for example, which is using DK here, yarns that are not only all in 100 gram skeins, but they also have the same meterage on them. Also, there is a little amount of deciding, okay, I want consistency in this project, so I'm going to pick all of my colors of DK yarn from the same brand, because in general, as a good rule of thumb, it is more consistent within a brand than it is between brands. Splitting yarn is one of the things that annoys me more than a human should be annoyed by a thing. And so now what I do is before I buy a new yarn, if I get to see it physically in person first, I pick up the ball, you pick it up, and you do this and have a look at it. And genuinely, that's quite a good test. Now, another really good test, which you probably don't want to do in a shop because it's a bit rude, is rubbing it. Bad quality splitty yarn will rub off. Now, it's one of my objections to plush yarn. I'm sorry, I keep talking about my objections to plush yarn. Have you been here before? I love it for some things, but it drives me wild. It drives me wild because it breaks so easily because the fibre in the middle is so thin, but it also sheds. Those frustrations can only be got around by either accepting that that is what is going to happen with that one, or in the case of plush yarn, you can work it with a very fine strand of like cotton or acrylic at the same time. Gives a little bit of a different look, but it can make the snapping less likely. But yeah, or just accept that that is something that's going to happen and just work it mentally into, okay, in this project, this is going to happen and that's okay. I don't do that very often. Batch numbers. I'm so careful about this now because I was so not careful about it before. So it's like dye lots in wallpaper. You want to have not just brand, type, color. You actually need to look for the special little number code on the packet that tells you that it's the same dye lot. If you buy the same color and it comes out looking differently, you've probably got a different dye lot. Sometimes it makes barely any difference and sometimes it can wreck your project. So check really carefully. If you know that you're going to use several skeins for something, make sure they're the same dye lot. Let's talk about hooks. I've got a lot of thoughts on hooks. I actually have very specifically, this is one of my favorite hooks. They came in a multi-pack from Amazon and I love them. They have a nice grip that is smooth but not too smooth. It's a bit squishy but not too squishy, and the throats on every single one of them are incredibly smooth. They slide the yarn through, they never catch on it. A good hook completely alters your experience when crocheting. A bad hook might have ridges within the throat which catches the yarn on it. That makes the yarn split, but it also stops the flow of your work. It can make it more likely that you get wrist pain in my experience because it's jarring on it, and it just makes the experience less fun. It makes you want to stop crocheting because your flow is constantly being interrupted and your yarn is being ruined. Therefore, the quality of each of the stitches doesn't look as good because there's snaps and frays within the fibers of the yarn, which is bad. Basically, bad hooks are frustrating and they can really alter. And I think that if you started a beginner off with a bad hook, that it could make them think that the entire hobby is not fun because it impedes so much. It is so fundamental to what you're doing. And then there are sort of technique-based frustrations. And now I know one of these is gauge, and I really avoid making anything that involves having a gauge because the idea of working to a gauge and doing what essentially feels like maths just throws and intimidates me. So for this one, I'm really sorry I have no advice on gauge. Please share your gauge advice below for the people who are watching. But gauge is absolutely a challenge for me in crochet. It is the reason that I have made a couple of sweaters for myself and I have never produced the patterns for other people because I can't get my head around it. I am very much not a maths person. Numbers are not my friend, and it's just, yeah, gauge, no gauge. Some people have similar frustration with tension, and it was something that frustrated me. I remember very early on in the hobby, over a decade ago, and it was something that when I started teaching my daughter sort of a year or so ago, that initially she found frustrating. And there is something wonderful about watching someone's tension issues melt away. I genuinely believe people have personal tensions. My tension tends to run quite tight. I think it's because I'm quite tightly wound as a person, and that works really well for toys that I make, but it can mean that it's not ideal for blankets. So I try to deliberately loosen up when I'm making blankets in a way that I don't when I'm making toys. But tension issues can really, really ruin someone's experience of a project because they can change the shape and size of what they're producing. And if tension is the cause of your frustrations, super annoying advice alert, it's just practice. You just have to do it again and again. I recommend recommend that you practice in rows or in rounds. So make a long tube that's like a three-dimensional cylinder. Make a three-dimensional cylinder, or just go backwards and forwards in a round, maybe making some granny squares or a corner to corner blanket. Just practice. I promise that if you practice enough, it will become what they inaccurately call muscle memory, and you will find over time that tension does become more consistent. It is so much practice. Colour changes are another thing that is a real challenge for some people. I don't tend to get too worked up about them. I lazy colour change. I don't know if there's a term for it. I just do half a stitch, swap the yarn and carry on. And it's just, I'm completely happy with that methodology. However, if colour changes are one of the things that is frustrating you, I can recommend just having a little look on tags on Instagram or on YouTube here for tutorials for invisible colour changes, because I've seen 3 or 4 incredibly good ways of making invisible colour changes, some more complicated than others. But if it matters to you that the colour change is hidden, there are ways around that. Go and give them a go. And if you've got any that you can recommend in terms of tutorials to other people, please do feel free to drop them in the comments, because I know that that is a real thing for some people, and that is fine, because we care about what we care about. It doesn't matter why we care about it, and colour changes really do matter to a lot of people. And on the technical side as well, joining things together can be very frustrating for some people. Now, whether that is crocheting different squares of a granny square blanket together or physically hand sewing, it can be a real point of frustration. There are some lovely tutorials on joining things together on YouTube. Again, like constantly recommending the platform. I've also got some brilliant books on joining them, but some of it is just trial and error. And honestly, like so many other things in life, you might find that you're getting frustrated by joining because you're doing a method that is just not actually that natural to you. And particularly for sewing toys together, I highly recommend just giving it a go, doing what you feel is logical and might work, like a mattress style in and out stitch around the edge of things. Just give different things a go. It's always fine to do a bit of joining, look at it. If you're not happy, just very gently undo that. It's very unlikely to impact the actual look of what you're making, and you can practice several times on the same object and come up with something that works a lot better for you. Blocking was a huge one for me. I did not see why I should block. I didn't want to. That sounded like a waste of time. I didn't want to get to the end of the project and then do another thing before I could jump around and be excited about it. That was silly. I block. Now I have a little blocking board, or I stick it underneath a really big book. I have a big book of snakes. I stick my big book of snakes on top of something and just flatten it. Blocking is frustrating. I get that, because it adds to the time that you're waiting. But I urge you, if you're frustrated by blocking, just suck it up. just block anyway. If it is a project that is 2-dimensional and you want it to be flat, or you want the sizing to be consistent because it's a wearable thing, give it a little tiny light spray with water and either pin it out or just flatten it down. It makes a huge difference, and I know it's annoying, but it is worth the effort. Some people feel really frustrated by frogging, and frogging is just the colloquialism for undoing what you've done. And sometimes you frog around and that's a little bit frustrating, and sometimes you take off an entire sleeve and it feels like your life is over. But I think that again is one of the things that you have to accept, that you have 2 choices in this scenario. You plow on and you amend the stitches by either joining 2 together or adding 2 extra ones to get back to the count that you wanted to have on, or you undo it. And those are really your only 2 choices. And I know personally that I would almost always rather undo and then redo it and know that it's right, than every time I glance at something go, messed up there, didn't you? Just try and weigh up what you find more challenging. Really, is your bigger challenge undoing it and the frustration of that, or will your bigger challenge be the personal challenge of looking at an object and knowing it wasn't quite what you wanted it to be? They're different challenges, aren't they? There are physical challenges to crochet as well, and now, even if we assume that you are a default healthy person with no health complications, if your posture is poor or if you crochet for too long, you are going to suffer from some kind of strain in your joints, pain in your back. I've been really lucky to this point to get away without having most of those things, but a big challenge for a lot of people within the hobby is working around carpal tunnel, back pain, eye strain, all things that are physically connected to the hobby. Personally, my physical challenges around the hobby are more to do with like sensory things like texture and sound. I cannot abide working with yarns that squeak. I am very bothered by yarns that are coarse when they rub against my hand. I overcome those challenges by being more picky about the yarn I'm using and being willing to like accommodate my own personal kind of issues around sensory stuff by just putting that yarn away and going, okay, this isn't for me. I'm going to stop this project, start it in a different yarn. I can donate that one. There's still plenty of good yarn there, but it's not for me. And accepting my own limitations in that way. It's the same for when my wrist very occasionally hurts when I'm doing too much. I have to know to tell myself, stop. Just stop now or it's going to get worse. And so that is kind of like a self-management thing. Now, if you've got ongoing medical issues like forms of arthritis or stuff like this, you need to know your own limits and you need to listen to your body. And sometimes that's really hard because our brains are like, yay, keep doing the thing. And our bodies are like, whoa there, now's not the time. And I've had throughout my whole life this issue with stuff. Particularly, I love running, but I get really, really sore knees when I run too much. And the number of times in the past where I have tried to run through it and it's been a really bad idea. These are the things that, you know, we need to know our own bodies and our own limitations. And throughout our lives, especially as we all get older and meet different challenges, accepting this is me, this is who I am, these are my limitations, this is the amount of time I can spend doing this, and these are the things that I can do to make it better, whether it's, you know, a temperature thing can help for some people, like cold compresses or warm compresses, or just having a bit of a break, and talking to like a physio or a doctor who can assist you in working out how to manage it. They're real challenges, and I hope that they don't completely put you off, but you should know that you are so much more likely to be completely put off if you don't listen to what your body's telling you, and speaking from bitter experience. Now, some of the other challenges more pertain to lifestyle and personality. So, for example, there are challenges in terms of budgeting. Budgeting is a big part of the hobby and working within our own means. Sometimes it's a choice between deciding to make many things with a yarn that we don't love as much, or just a couple of things with one that we really do. A little bit of planning can make a really big difference to how well that budgeting goes as well. And being realistic, you know, not just in terms of money, but in terms of the time that you actually have to spend on the hobby before you invest in the products that you're going to use to do the thing that actually realistically you're not going to be able to do this year. Workspace is a big deal for me. Now, I work from home, so I'm lucky enough to have a home office, and when my office is a mess, my brain is a mess. I find it incredibly hard to focus. Having a messy environment to crochet in, I don't know about you, but that's a really big challenge for me. If I want to relax into a project, regardless of whether or not I'm going to find the project itself relaxing, I need my space around me to be clear. And that is really challenging for a lot of reasons, for all of us, for different reasons, whether that's like the logistics or the time or like the psychological ability to get stuff sorted out. A messy workspace is a big challenge for me if I want to crochet. I need it to be clear room, clear brain for me. And finally, on lifestyle, there is the interference factor. At the beginning of this video, my cat came in. He is interfering. He is distracting. If I crochet on the couch, he will climb on top of me, on top of all of the yarn. If I have my door closed to my study, he will ask to come in. He gets in the way. He gets tangled up in stuff. And at various points over my children, I'm now in the lucky position that I don't physically have my crochet interfered with as much when I'm working, but I still have a lot of chatter, and I'm a one stream of consciousness kind of person, and if they try and talk to me about something while I'm trying to write down how many stitches were in the rounds and instructions, that's too much for me. So I now don't write patterns when I'm spending time with my family, and I only do mindless crochet when I'm around my kids, because then they have my full attention when they're talking to me and I'm not trying to secretly internalize how many stitches were in that last round. Time pressure is another big one, and I think with Christmas just around the corner, that's something that's come up for a lot of people. I've decided not to crochet anything for people for Christmas presents this year for a lot of reasons, but time pressure is one of them, and that can feel like a really big challenge. And You know, obviously it's not helpful once you've started and the deadline's approaching, but for the future, just give yourself twice as much time as you think you're going to need if you've got something that you want to make for a deadline. Often I find that putting off starting is a big thing, and once I've started, I'm away, I'm in the zone, I'm doing it. So give yourself an unreasonably large amount of time would be my advice, and don't take on projects that you don't realistically think that you could actually do. Like, I think there's a bit of a people pleaser in a lot of us, and we want to say yes to stuff because we want to make people happy, but sometimes it's just not realistic, and it's okay to say to people, actually, this takes quite a lot longer than you might have realised, and I'm really sorry, that's not attainable for me. And that's fine. This sense of overwhelm and a fear of failure, I think, is a huge challenge for a lot of people. Whether or not your crochet is a private thing for you, or something that you've chosen to share with the world, or that you'd like to share with the world in the form of patterns, it's a big deal doing something that you made yourself, and it's actually okay to feel overwhelmed. That's what I tell myself. It's okay to feel overwhelmed, and the final press of the button, the final decision to share something with other people, that is yours, and you are not a coward. You're not a failure. You're not a failure if you don't hit your goal on the first attempt. You're not a failure if you don't hit your goal on the 50th attempt, okay? As long as you're trying, and as long as your target remains the same, you're still working towards it. And honestly, this is meant to be a hobby. It's meant to be fun. So I really hope that if you're experiencing stress over the hobby because of your own challenges, or even if you're trying to turn it into a job, that you still appreciate the enjoyment that there is to be had in it. And I hope that some of these bits of advice have helped you to maybe look at the challenges in a slightly different way. But if you have any thoughts that you would like to share with me on any of these challenges, or how you overcome your own personal challenges, or if you want to tell us what's challenging you at the moment so we can try and give you a boost or give you a hand or just commiserate, because sometimes that's all you can do, then please chat to me in the comments section below. I would love to see you there. I think that I've gone on for quite a long time with this one, and so if you've made it to the end, then stick the end in the comments section so we can all celebrate with you your excellent power of commitment to crochet YouTube videos. But yeah, thank you for joining me, and I'll see you in the next one. And in the meantime, happy crocheting.